This video is on question 47 of the 2012 TSA, and here we're asked which option identifies the principle underlying the argument. And this is the passage that we're given. So in sentence 1 of the passage, we're told that buttons on the right-hand side of clothes are easier to fasten and unfasten for a right-handed person than they are for a left-handed person. Buttons are on the right-hand side for men, says the author, but on the left-hand side for women. And this difference arose, says the author, because buttons used to be very expensive, and they were only worn by women who were rich enough to have servants helping them to dress. However, finishes the author, nearly everyone buttons their own clothes now, and so producers of women's clothes should put the buttons on the right-hand side. So that's the passage we're given. Now, there doesn't seem to be a principle in the passage explicitly which we can identify and abstract from to find the principle underlying the argument. No. So the best thing to do is to try and understand the argument, try and get to grips with its structure, and hopefully the principle will be fairly clear when we look at its structure. So where is the argument in this passage? Well, the first 3 sentences seem to be a series of facts. The argument actually seems to be just in the 4th sentence of the passage. Here we have a conclusion, indicated by so, and then a reason which comes before this conclusion. So sentence 4 seems to contain the entirety of the argument. And what is sentence 4 saying? Well, it looks to be saying something like this. Nearly everyone buttons their own clothes now, forgive the misspelling, and therefore producers should put buttons on the right-hand side of clothes. So that's our argument. Now, the principle underlying this argument may not be clear to you at this point, and that's okay. It's not that clear to me. But that's fine. We have a clear grip on the argument now, so we can go into looking at the options, and hopefully we'll notice a plausible candidate for the principle that underlies this argument. So here we have our 5 options, and here we have our argument. So let's take each option in turn to see if one is a plausible candidate for the principle that underlies the argument. Option A says that no one needs a servant in order to help them dress. Now, looking at the argument, the fact that not everyone needs a servant in order to dress doesn't seem to underlie the move from this to this. It doesn't seem to underlie the move from nearly everyone buttons their own clothes to the claim that producers should put buttons on the right-hand side. So, option A looks like it's going to be irrelevant. What about option B? This says that wealth shouldn't determine fashion in clothing. Well, if we take a look at the argument again, this doesn't seem to identify the principle that underlies the move from the premise to the conclusion. And so B doesn't seem relevant either. C says that cost-effectiveness should determine design in clothing. And nor does this, if we look at the argument, seem to underlie the move from the reason to the conclusion. So this too looks like it's going to be irrelevant. What about options D and E? D says that it's a good thing to break with tradition. Now, if we take a look at the argument, the author is recommending in the conclusion that we break with a particular tradition, namely buttons being placed on the left-hand side of clothes for women. However, this is merely a particular tradition. And D is making the more general claim that it's a good thing to break with tradition, full stop. So D doesn't seem to be the principle underlying the argument because it seems to be something stronger than what the author is expressing in this argument. So that leaves option E. This says that the needs of the majority should prevail. Now let's take a look at our argument again. The argument is that nearly everyone buttons their own clothes now, and so producers should put buttons on the right-hand side, i.e. make it easier. Well, does it seem plausible that the needs of the majority should prevail is the principle underlying this argument? Well, it does. Why does the author recommend that producers put buttons on the right-hand side? Well, because the majority of people button their own clothes now, and the majority, or rather the needs of the majority, should prevail. Because more people are right-handed than left-handed, and because there are very few servants who help women to dress anymore, the needs of the majority demand that producers should put buttons on the right-hand side on women's clothes. And so option E does seem to identify the principle underlying the argument.